and welcome back to Nerd Social, your new headquarters for all things social sciences. Welcome back, guys. Today we've got a great topic. We're going to be focusing on something that's from a book I read by Scott Lilienfeld, Stephen J. Lynn, John Rossio, and Barry Beierstein, a book that's called 50 Great Myths of Psychology. And today we are going to be checking out the top 10 from that list. So here are the top 10 psychological myths. Let's get started, shall we? Okay, first off, we have the theory that people have either a dominant right or left side of their brain. The theory is that some people are left brain and others are right brain. Those that use their left hemisphere are more analytical and logical, while those that use their right hemisphere are more creative and autistic. Except that's not how the brain works. Yes, certain regions of the brains are specialized and tailored to fulfill certain tasks, but the brain doesn't handicap itself by predominantly using one side or the other. Both hemispheres are used just about equally. The left brain, right brain myth was rampant for decades and perpetuated by New Age thinkers, but the rise of the functional MRI has granted us a first-hand look at brain activity. According to Scott Lilienfeld, it's showing us just the opposite, and that both sides of the brain are used almost equally. Next up on our top 10 list, we have the idea that having your baby listen to Mozart as an infant will increase its intelligence. In 1993, a study was published in Nature found that college students who listened to a mere 10 seconds of a Mozart sonata were endowed with augmented spatial reasoning skills. The news media ran wild with it. Lost in translation was the fact that the effects were fleeting, but it was too late. The Mozart effect was born. Since then, millions of copies of Mozart CDs marketed to boost intelligence have been sold. The state of Georgia even passed a bill to allow every newborn to receive a free cassette or CD of Mozart's music. Anything that heightens alertness is likely to increase performance on mentally demanding tasks, but it's unlikely to produce long-term effects on spatial ability or, for that matter, overall intelligence, Lilienfeld explains. So listening to Mozart's music may not be needed to boost our performance. Drinking a glass of lemonade or a cup of coffee may do the trick. Next up on our top 10 list of the top psychological myths, we have the idea that our memory is like a recorder. About 36% of Americans believe that our brains perfectly preserve past experiences in the form of memories. This is decidedly not the case. Today, there's a broad consensus among psychologists that memory isn't reproductive, but it doesn't duplicate precisely what we've experienced, but reconstructive. What we recall is often a blurry mixture of accurate recollections, along with what gels with our beliefs, needs, emotions, and hunches, Lillian writes. Our memory is glaringly fallible, and this is problematic, particularly in the courtroom. Eyewitness testimony has led to the false convictions of a great many innocent people. The only exception to this is the case of the photographic memory, which is a complete rarity. This idea that your memory is like a recorder is inherently false otherwise. Your memory is a compilation of all of the things that you've ever known, all of your feelings, all of your emotions, and it's not as reliable as people like to believe. So keep that in mind next time you're thinking about this. Your memory is not that reliable, unfortunately. I wish that were the case. Next up, we have number 7 on our list of top 10 psychological myths, and that is that dreams possess symbolic meaning. About 43% of Americans believe that dreams reflect unconscious desires. Over half of them agree that dreams can unveil hidden truths. Admittedly, dreaming mostly remains an enigma to science, but the act is almost certainly not a crystal ball of the unconscious mind. This Freudian induced belief was garnered some specific support that goes a little something like this. Dreaming is the jumbled representation of our brain's actions to assort and cobble together information and experience like a file sorting system. Thus, as Lillian says, dream interpretation would be haphazard at best. Rather than relying on a dream dictionary to foretell the future or help you to make life decisions, it would probably be wisest to outweigh the pros and cons of differing courses of actions carefully and consult trusted friends and advisor, Lillian writes. So this is, again, a myth. It's inherently false. There's no truth to it, unfortunately. Next up, we've got number 6, which is that lie detector tests are accurate. Polygraphs boast 99% accuracy, but is that the truth? Those who operate the lie detector test say that they are accurate, 99% even. The reality, though, is that nobody, not even a machine, can accurately tell when somebody is lying. Lie detector tests often operate under the assumption that telltale physiological signs reveal that people aren't telling the truth, such as their heart rate and blood pressure. Thus, polygraph measure indicators like skin conductance, blood pressure, and respiration. When these signs spike out of the test taker's normal range in response to a question, the operator interprets that a lie has been told. This is not always the case, though, and again, it can be tricky in the courtroom because lie detector tests are often used as evidence against people. Be careful with this one, it is also a myth. Number 5 on our list of the top 10 psychological myths is that opposites attract. The union between two electrical charges, one positive and one negative, is the quintessential love story in physics. Opposites attract. But the same cannot be said for a flaming liberal and a rabid conservative, or an exercise aficionado and a professional sloth. People are not electric charges. Though Hollywood loves to perpetuate the idea that we are romantically attracted to people who differ from us, in practice, this is not the case. People are more often attracted to those they have more in common with. And next up, we have number 4, and that is that shock therapy is a brutal treatment. According to surveys, most people view ECT, electric convulsion therapy, as a barbaric relief of psychiatry's medieval past. And while ECT may once have been a violent process, it hasn't been like that for over 5 decades. Yes, it is still in use today. Now, however, nowadays, patients who receive ECT, electroconvulsion therapy, first receive a general anesthetic, a muscle relaxant, and occasionally a substance to prevent salivation, Lilienfeld describes. Then a physician places electrodes on the patient's head and delivers an electric shock. This shock induces a seizure lasting 45 to 60 seconds. Although the anesthetic and muscle relaxant inhibit the patient's movements, the patient is not in pain during this. So it's still used, but it's not painful, it's not barbaric, it's nothing like it used to be today. Next up, We have number 3 on our list of the top 10 psychological myths. We made it to number 3, and that is that we only use 10% of our brain power. About 43% of Americans, when surveyed, believed that we use approximately 10% of our brain power. But that's not true. Metabolically speaking, the brain is an expensive tissue to maintain, hogging as much as 20% of our resting caloric expenditure, despite constituting a mere 2% of the average human body weight. The myth likely stems back to American psychologist William James, who once exposed the idea that the average person rarely achieves more than 10% of their intellectual potential. Over the years, self help gurus and hucksters looking to make a buck morphed that notion into the idea that 90% of our brain is dormant and locked away. They have the key, of course, and you can have it for a pittance. Next up on our list is number 2, and that is that there is an autism epidemic. Many believe that the prevalence of autism has increased substantially in recent decades. Prior to the 1990s, the prevalence of autism in the United States was estimated at 1 in 2,500. In 2007, the rate was 1 in 150. In March, the CDC came out with new startling numbers, 1 in 68. However, when looking further into this, the diagnostic criteria for autism that is in the DSM 5, which is what they use to diagnose it, has been loosened significantly. And in between 1992 and 1998, a study conducted in England tracked the cases, and the rates didn't budge when using the same diagnostic criteria. Next up is number 1, and that is that subliminal advertising works. Companies have been using tricks of subliminal advertising to increase sales for decades, and many believe in the method's effectiveness. It's one of the great conspiracies of the television era that advertisers and influencers are able to flash subtle messages across our streams and alter how we think and act as well as what we buy. Rest assured, however, these advertisements don't work. In a great many carefully controlled laboratories trials, subliminal messages did not affect subjects' consumer choices or voting preferences, and when tested in the real world, subliminal messaging failed just as spectacularly. Thank you all for watching. Please comment which myths you believed below and subscribe so that I can continue making all of this free content. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.